They call it 107 days because it feels like it takes that long to read.
That's it? That's the bit?
They call it 107 days because Biden's not lucid for the other 258. They call it 107 days because 107 days after you read the book, Kamala Harris comes out of your TV and kills you.
What?
They
God
call it
damn it, I didn't know
107
that.
days because on the 107th day, God wrote a book about how American voters failed to empower him to stop Satan, who he created. I don't know, guys. This one was dire.
I thought it was good. I was like, fuck yeah.
Which day was your favorite?
We're gonna fight for. I don't know.
It's like picking your favorite child, you know?
Right.
You know, all 107 of your children. They're all
107 of your children. They're all useless. I liked the beginning where she quoted Kendrick Lamar. That was pretty sick.
I like the beginning where she said that it takes more bullshit, like more energy to refute bullshit than to produce it, because that's the experience that I had reading this book.
Listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.
Welcome back to the Socialist Shelf. Jacob and Lenore barely surviving this book that someone requested we read. I forget who. We're joined by a guest today because we're talking 107 Days by Kamala Harris, little known author. And it's a lot. Let's just say that up front. So it's definitely a 3-person job.
It was 35 and 1/3 days per person. No, 2/3. I'm sorry.
Something like that. And so we decided we had to bring on a supporter here. We had to bring on somebody to give us some assistance. So we've got Josh Mayfield, artist, organizer, all around cool guy who's here, friend of the pod, ready to give us assistance. How you feeling, Josh?
It's too early to tell. I've been sleeping on a strange bed for the last month. Just kind of weird transition moving stuff. And I'm just gonna say that this is a hell of a book to listen to, because I couldn't get a hold of the copy of the book. I got the audiobook. So I've been listening to this while dealing with sleep deprivation and insomnia.
Wow.
Wow.
And I think Kamala Harris is my permanent sleep paralysis demon now.
Is she a better narrator than J.D. Vance, at least?
I listened to some of the audiobook, and she is in fact a better narrator than J.D. Vance. That is a seriously low bar, though.
I will admit I listened to most of it at like 1.7 speed.
Yep, as you should.
Which, you know, I don't know if that impacts like the quality of it or the kind of like, I don't know, demonic nature of what's being said, but or how it appears in my dreams. But
your sleep paralysis demon is Kamala Harris, but she's like got the powers of the Flash.
It's Kamala
She's
Harris
so
doing Ben
fast.
Shapiro.
Oh god.
yeah. I mean, that's what it feels like.
Oh god.
Oh god.
Everyone's two favorite people. Yeah. No. This is.
I do have to say, as a longtime listener of the show, I have to point out that the theme song it exhorts people to read good books. And
that doesn't mean
that is
we
the
read
opposite
good books.
Yeah, that's the opposite of what we did this last 2
What I
weeks.
find is we are telling people the books not to read by doing this.
Yes.
That's how I stretch it to fit that thing. Because folks, this is not a good book. And honestly, like, I had hoped it would maybe even be more insightful, in the sense of, not that I'm going to ever agree or like Kamala Harris, but I thought there might be more insight here. most of it is just, it's pretty dire shit. It's pretty bad. I don't suppose either of you, I mean, it's, usually when we're talking about authors, we're like your history with their work. I mean, we're all familiar with Kamala Harris. There's no doubt about that. But when did this book, Josh, you start, when did this book come on your radar? Like, because it was like not till this summer that I even knew it was going to be a thing. And then I started hearing about people yelling at her at book events and all kinds of fun stuff like that. But it kind of came out of nowhere to me.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like I had seen, so I work at a library, so I had seen it like on the like orders for like the books that were coming up. And then I started seeing like the media appearances and things like that, and of course they're all trying to make it seem like a much more interesting book than it is, but there are some like genuinely interesting events around this book that I imagine we'll probably get into at some point. So that kind of was that sparked my interest in this book, and then and now I'm here on the other side of it. So.
Yeah, I had posted who wants to be on like the worst possible episode of our podcast, and you dropped in the DMs. And actually, it's funny.
It's me.
You and someone else replied, and we had 2 books this month that are gonna be real tough ones. And so you got one of them, and our mystery guest for next week got the other one. But which we'll announce at the end of the episode what book that's gonna be. So everyone has to listen. Lenore, what about this book for you? Because for me, I literally learned about this book from an email from a listener telling us we have to read it.
Yeah, I mean, I knew Kamala Harris was going to do a book eventually. They all do, always, inevitably.
Not like this necessarily, though. This is a particular type. But
I mean, it's a post-campaign book. It's definitely not unheard of. And like the grift is bipartisan. It's universal. Everybody in Trump won when they got out of that administration wrote a tell-all. I'm not interested in any of them. But yeah, I knew this was coming. I knew, the content gods demanded a sacrifice, and here we are.
Yeah, it certainly gave some good stuff for the content gods, but maybe not the content gods she was hoping for. Because this book, like, the far right has loved this book.
Really?
Like, the right-wing media, oh my God, in the sense of, like, dunking on her, right? Because Fox News is on at the gym every time I go to the gym. And, like, The 5 is often on. And, like, Jesse Waters has been quoting from this book, like, every day for the last 2 weeks. And just different things of, like, look how stupid the Democrats are. And I gotta say, she's handing a lot of material straight to her enemies here.
It really speaks to, not that they haven't been doing enormous damage and terror, but it really speaks to the abject failures of ICE that they don't have more to talk about in terms of, like, demonizing immigrants.
They seem to, they want to talk about that other stuff, but they're just, the content is not there. I feel like they've got to pad it out with look how bad Kamala's book is. But I mean, hey, it is bad.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, folks. We're more efficient than Fox News.
Well,
we got 1 episode and then we're done.
Well, Jesse Waters seems to think this book is too far left, though. So we're which is a wild take.
Yeah, what fucking book did he read? Jesus.
I don't know. But I'll tell you a little bit about this.
7 days that shook the world.
It's fucking Kamala Harris, storming the Tsar's palace. Let's go. That's like Trump's version of her. Yeah, Trump posted AI art of her at like leading a communist rally once. It's like, y'all threatening us with a good time constantly. Kamala is pretty good, I gotta say. Okay, well, I'm not going to give as comprehensive a bio as I typically do because y'all know who Kamala Harris is, but a few points I wanted to hit about her just to get her career really quick. Kamala is, she was born in what year? 1964. I find her parentage very interesting. So her father is Donald Harris, a professor and economist who has called himself post-Keynesian and at times a Marxist. I think he kind of shies away from the term Marxist these days, but he definitely has written about post-colonial stuff. He's from Jamaica. He certainly is far, far, far to the left of Kamala. And yeah, is a pretty his scholarship seems to be pretty decent. As a father, he seems to have been pretty not decent. So, Donald, maybe if you had been a more present father, we would not be reading this book. Just saying. Her mother is Shyamala Gopalan. She's from India, and she's a breast cancer researcher, and she's really interesting to me. And she died in 2009, so really like pre her running for national office. But she's fascinating as she's this. She was actually like a cutting edge breast cancer researcher. Which is a much more, useful position than, her daughter would go on to filling. But Kamala was born in 1964 in San Francisco. She would go to Howard and then become a lawyer, become San Francisco DA. She was a prosecutor, famously called herself the top cop in California after becoming attorney general. She then became senator. And her whole thing as senator, I don't know if y'all really remember this. It was a very brief tenure as senator, where her whole thing was very much like owning Trump. Like it was kind of the counterbalance. She was one of those people that had a lot of viral moments of like she was grilling Kavanaugh and grilling Gorsuch, and she coined the term Muslim ban for his order of blocking Muslims coming into the country. She had some some effective moments in Congress as far as you can, not in like actually blocking stuff very often, but in getting things into popular consciousness. She is a very good speaker in that attack sense because she is a prosecutor through and through. Mm-hmm. That is herself, heart and soul. And I
sometimes wonder how much of this is kayfabe, right? I don't recall what Elizabeth Warren was like censured for, like speaking too long or violating some Senate decorum thing about Jeff Sessions. Whatever that whole kerfuffle was, you remember Mitch McConnell said that thing that was like, she was warned, and despite that she persisted. Like, that just felt like such a scripted moment, right? Like, yeah, we're going to sell a lot of merch off of this.
I don't know. Kamala had a number of moments like that. To her, I mean, it's hard to give these people credit, right? But like, she did actually vote against Trump's like appointments, which is apparently a high bar these days as a member of the opposition party. So she was seen as someone who was going to go after Trump, which is an energy people wanted. And they still want. They want fight. And so when she announced her primary campaign in 2019, she actually matched Bernie in individual donors on her first couple days. Like, really? Wow. She had a massive amount of individual donors, and her whole like framing was like, I'm an attorney and I'm going after Donald Trump, and people liked that. And then she actually like did the primary process, and people didn't like her as much. And she dropped out before Iowa. But she was picked for vice president candidate with Joe Biden, which in my opinion is one of the most tone-deaf things ever to do in 2020. In the middle of anti-police brutality protests, to pick a woman who calls herself the top cop of California, who, despite her trying in this book to say, I was a progressive prosecutor, no one called her a progressive prosecutor at the time even. Also, progressive prosecutors themselves are often not particularly progressive, but even by those standards, I mean, you listen to our propaganda episode, she was not. She was locking people up left and right for minor crimes. She was going after parents who were having trouble getting their kids to school. She was prosecuting cases to try to keep trans people from having health care. I mean, like, she was vicious. She went after people. She went for the maximum possible thing at every turn. As vice president, we'll talk about this, but was kind of not really in the spotlight. We didn't see a whole lot of her. She had complaints about this. She had a few iconic moments, such as telling people in Guatemala not to come to the United States. And also, that one weird meeting with Macron. And then she was thrust into the role of Democratic nominee when Joe Biden went up on stage. And I don't even know how to describe that debate.
Just completely shit the bed. Like, it was terrible.
Lenore and I were outside that debate, is the funny thing. We were at a protest outside the debate, and there's people like... Lenore, were you there? I was definitely there.
I was not there that evening, no.
Some counter-protesters projected the Dark Brandon meme onto the wall behind us.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, that's what you've got? Because everyone there who wasn't terminally online thought they were with us in anti-Biden. They were like, look, they made him a devil.
Oh my
So,
God.
hence her getting 107 days to run for the presidency. And spectacular, which is the shortest time in a modern election from a candidate being selected to election day. And this book is basically based on her diary she wrote in that period. She worked with Geraldine Brooks to like make it read better, which to me that's a very odd pairing because Geraldine Brooks like has typically pretty good politics. In my experience, like she's written very vociferously against intervention in Afghanistan and Iraq. In 2017, she helped write Kingdoms of Olives and Ash, which is writers confronting the Israeli occupation. She's a Jewish woman and was like felt called to like speak out against Israel. This was less than 10 years ago, but she decided to collaborate with Kamala on this book and also help launder Kamala's reputation on that very issue. So I don't know enough about Geraldine Brooks to speak, but I thought that was like a weird detail to throw in there. I don't know if either of y'all know anything about that, but I thought that was something worth noting. Maybe she'll get her own episode at some point.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with her. I will say it is really interesting because I hadn't heard that, but the whole book does give that very like ghost written vibe to it. Like it's the type of book that you can tell was just like scrubbed up and like all the edges were sanded off, and it actually it makes it so much less like you said. I was hoping that I would be able to gauge like or to glean more from this in terms of like insight or like how the enemy thinks, and instead like most of it is like very like ghost written pablum. Like it's very bland and uninspired and just kind of meant to be completely inoffensive, which is really funny because it is actually doing the opposite, is actually offending like broad swaths of everyone. Like obviously like the Fox News people are getting a lot of play from this, but obviously between this and her remarks around the book, she's also getting a lot of flack from the left.
And from just like mainstream Democrats. A number of Democratic operatives were upset about this book because she really blames everyone but herself.
She throws them all under the bus. It's incredible.
In not in an interesting way. Or I mean it's interesting, but not in a way that it's like I'm pivoting, here's where the party needs to go. It is like petty personal grievance.
It's interesting in that like I did not see her just like you said so pettily just like throwing everyone under the bus. So like I think it's more like it's not done in an interesting way. It's more like, oh god, I didn't think she would actually go like that far in blaming literally everyone and taking no responsibility for herself.
I was joking around with a friend of mine. I just was sending her quotes from this book, and she responded, "Need to queen out with her," snaps, like sarcastically. But like, there's a version of this that would be more like that. I will say, like, God, I read some Geraldine Brooks in college, and I really like her writing. So it's interesting that this is the polished version. It's like, I wish this was just the Geraldine Brooks version, because it's not that either. It's just like, I think she got a paycheck. I think she did the Tim LaHaye thing where she's like writing 100 pages a day, and she's just like, let's fucking go. Let's like get this thing pumped out.
Do you know what it is? Can I say something positive about this book before we really tear into it? Following on from, what you say about Geraldine Brooks, her writing, that there are parts of this book that do read pretty compellingly. I couldn't help but think of The President is Missing while I was reading this. Because
that makes you think of something compelling?
Well, no, because parts of this book do read like The President is Missing, like the way that Harris is describing her relationships to like world leaders and stuff. Like, we have these disagreements, but on this, there's no daylight between our position, right? But the other thing, of course, is that when Harris/Brooks gets into like the nuts and bolts of like how a campaign runs and how tightly everything has to go off, that's where it gets that's where you really do see a cadence that really buries you in this detail, but then snaps you back to the exigency of the moment. I have this paragraph here that really illustrates that. I was vice president of the United States. The VP always has a daily schedule crammed with myriad responsibilities. My staff secretary would deliver the schedule and the fat briefing binders for the events of the next day to my residence late the evening before. The schedule outlined in exquisite detail every move of every person around me, described to the inch and the minute down to which people will ride the elevator with me at each location. If there will be a photo line at some point in the day, even the number of camera clicks will be noted, indicating whether the shots are going to be with groups or individuals. Dozens of people are involved, from Secret Service to White House staff to traveling press, and all of them must be choreographed. Within this elaborate dance, my moves are indicated by the word "you" in bold letters, and that is bolded there. So, there's something there. There's a sense of a very unreal degree of choreography and planning that goes into this. And in a better book, this might have been contrasted with how out of touch Kamala Harris's scene is with that of everyday Americans, and there might be some musings on that, but there's not.
That's kind of how our podcast runs. The way she described that, we are a very similar operation. It's everything is
true.
So it's just like, it's like a Swiss
Every
watch.
meow of every cat on this podcast is laid out in advance.
I know. I'm
you wouldn't
impressed.
believe
The cat has better radio discipline than I do, which is telling. That's impressive.
She outstrips me at times too.
Shiloh has been training. Yeah, so this book, the way it is formatted is every chapter is a day, starting 107 days to the election. And when I realized that, I went, oh no. Because I was like, there's at least 107 chapters. There's more, actually, because you have election day, the day after the election. Some of these are blessedly short. Some of these are fairly long. I will say, not a horrible way of it being laid out, but, can be a little dire at times. From the beginning of this book, we have right where Kamala finds out that Joe Biden is dropping out and is going to endorse her. You have she's been hanging out, again, I'll say this because I don't want to have to give this qualification every time, so I'm going to give this qualification on the top. Hear everything I say with the "to hear her tell it" at the front of it, right? Because I don't know that she was hanging out with her nieces and like playing puzzles with them when this happened. Let's say she was. Maybe she was. To hear her tell it. Because I think that it is fully possible that a politician like this also could just make that shit up. Or maybe not. Politicians are human, which actually makes them like worse often. I'm often reminded of like apparently Tsar Nicholas II was like actually a really like sweet father and stuff like that and very personable. And at the end of the day, like, okay, that does not change what you do and what you inflict on the world. If anything, that shows the cognitive dissonance. You're not a machine. You are actually actively repressing your human emotions. So either way, you lose.
One of the most insane bits of In the Garden of Beasts is a footnote where Eric Larson talks about an interview with, I believe, the nephew of Putzi Hanfstengel, one of Hitler's, sinecures, and he talks about like when I was really small, I played trains with Uncle Dolph, as we called him. Jesus. He was like leaning over like a train, and he was making all the train noises, crawling under him, and it's like, wow, these people had lives and also went on to do some of the greatest evil.
Fuck yeah. I find like that's the very beginning though. You've got her getting called by Joe. It's very like Mission Impossible, one last job coded. Says she was apparently doing a jigsaw puzzle. And that's where I was when my secure phone rang at 11 minutes past 1. I glanced at the screen. Caller ID blocked. Only about a dozen people had my secure number. Of those few, only one came out blocked. I unfolded my legs, stood up, and walked around the corner of my office. Hi, Joe, I said. I need to talk to you. He was calling from his home in Rehoboth? I don't know. Beach, Delaware, where he'd gone to isolate after testing positive for COVID 4 days earlier. His voice sounded hoarse, exhausted. Decided I'm dropping out. You sure? I'm sure. Gonna announce it in a few minutes. And it goes on for a little bit, their little conversation. And she immediately has the moment where she says, I knew I was the candidate in the strongest position to win, the most qualified and ready, the highest name recognition, a powerful donor base, and I also knew, as he did, that I was the only person who would preserve his legacy. At this point, anyone else was bound to throw him and all the good he had achieved right under the bus. And I think that's such an important thing hanging over this whole thing. Because, yes, while she does throw Biden under the bus a handful of times in this book, to a lesser extent, does she throw his legacy under the bus? No, not particularly. One, because she is tied to that legacy. Two, maybe she actually has affection for Joe Biden. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in her head. Probably does. He, like, elevated her in a major way. But three, this is part of maybe the whole reason she lost the fucking election, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think a Democrat who was willing to say, like, blast Joe Biden with as close as this election was, very well may have won this thing, all things being equal. And the fact that she wouldn't break on this proves a point that I'm going to say repeatedly throughout this episode. They just didn't want it as bad as the Republicans. Like, they really just didn't want it that bad. The way you say after a football game, they were equal teams, but one side wanted it more. Mm-hmm. You see that repeatedly throughout this book, and that is one thing of it. Well, I'm not going to stoop to that. Okay, well, you're saying you're trying to stop a literal fascist in your words. Will you or won't you? Like, come on. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, they refer to her as, they refer to him, rather, as like a fascist that needs to be stopped by any means necessary. But then, you know, she goes on these book tours, she does these media appearances where she gets to have her little, like, clapback moments, and, like, she goes on The View and it's just, like, gets to recall the, you know, like, oh, I'm not going to say I told you so moment that everyone is like, oh, that's so fun. Oh, you know, everyone's falling all over themselves. Like, oh, that's fucking hilarious. It's like, ha ha ha, you know, yeah, you let a fascist get into the government by your own admission. And now, you know, you get to go back to brunch. You get to make these appearances, and you get to say, well, you know, we tried, but you guys didn't vote for us. And it's all your fault.
I have to say, too, like, shortly before this election, and I'm not saying what should have been done. I'm just saying we're talking everything on the table. Shortly before this election, the Supreme Court ruled that acting in the capacity as President of the United States, the president cannot commit a crime. You have a guy running who tried to overthrow the government. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could have arrested Donald Trump. Like, they could have done... Like, they could have ordered whatever they wanted. I'm not saying they, like, whatever. You can talk about what's proper or not. But when you're talking about, if we're taking them at their word that they think he is an actual fascist, then why would you not do that? You think he's a felon. You think he's an insurrectionist. You know he's a criminal. And you think he's a fascist. And you now have this power just given you by the Supreme Court. Really, you had it before, but now you really have it. That's also a remarkable thing as well. Like, I'm sorry, why is no one storming Mar-a-Lago? I'm just saying, like, straight up. And I know that, like, sounds like the comeback would be like, oh, free and fair elections. And I'm come back to this refrain. The other side doesn't care about the free and fair elections. The Republicans, if Trump had lost that election, they would have tried to get it overturned. Would he have had the juice to do it? Probably not, but he would have tried. There would have been violence. I don't know how it would have looked, but some shit would have gone down. And there is not that energy on the other side. And I think you're exactly right, Josh. It's because of their comfort. It's like their relative comfort. And it's like, because they're ultimately going to be fine. They're going to retreat and do their thing. And this is life and death for their voters. Their voters feel this very emotionally. You know, you talk to, like, your average Democratic voter. We on the show are very harsh towards the Democratic Party and will continue to be. But I feel great, like, empathy for your average Democratic voter who's worried about access to health care, worried about abortion rights, worried about militarism, immigrants, all of that stuff, and is making calculations based on that. And in this book shows in general, she has very few moments where it comes through at all that she's worried about the fate of the country. And when she does, it is so hollow. It's remarkable.
Well, and to my mind, it's a very you have the right of it, definitely. They are not threatened by Republicans and the rise of, you know, an increasingly powerful executive, because capital is not threatened by fascism. You know, like, it's something that they can discipline the rest of the country with by normalizing the idea that voting the wrong way can bring about fascism, and not a complete institutional failure to stop the organizing of fascists who would shatter those institutions and all working class organization and bring about their, you know, however long year Reich. I mean, it's very similar to my mind to, I can't remember if this was in the general last year or if it was in the midterms 2022, but you had the Democratic Party funneling tens of millions of dollars to very, very far-right candidates, to anti-abortion extremists, to election deniers, to Holocaust deniers, with the calculation that, well, these people will be, not popular enough to run, they'll split the vote, whatever. And it's like, okay, but we live in a country where a president can commit all kinds of crimes, sex crimes, war crimes, whatever, and people will vote, how they will vote regardless because, well, this guy will serve my material conditions. So what happens, Democrats, when the quote-unquote wrong person gets into office? What happens when you've normalized the idea that somebody who can do away with, bodily autonomy, with, free speech, with any number of freedoms, what happens when you've normalized that these people are allowed to purvey their political project in the public sphere?
Well, I'll tell you what they'll do in one case is one of these famous cases that they said was successful was the case of the Fetterman election, right? Where they gave a lot of money to make sure Dr. Oz won the primary for the Republicans because that is an embarrassing candidate. And they said, look, it worked. They elected Fetterman in a state that really we expected the Republicans to win. But first of all, we got fucking Fetterman. But second of all, now look where Dr. Oz is. Y'all propelled him. He won the primary. He got a national platform. Trump saw him on fucking Fox News. And now, Dr. Oz had a platform before, but let's be honest, no one had thought about Dr. Oz in 15 years.
A platform, by the way, that Oprah Winfrey gave him.
Yes. Oh, yeah. 15 years before. But I'm saying he was
She shouts out several times in this book. She's all about, oh, my good friend Oprah Winfrey,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like,
yes.
I don't know. The level of incredible tone deafness at many points whenever she gives these shout outs to, she's like, my good friend Oprah, my old buddy Joe Biden, all these people that are widely seen as in charitable terms at the very least kind of out of touch billionaires and charlatans, or in Joe Biden's case, absolute war criminals. And she just is like, oh yeah, these are just my good friends, and she'll casually talk about, oh, I saw so-and-so at Martha Vineyards, and it's just I don't think she realizes how she comes off at so many different points.
I like that. Yeah. There's when she announces she's running very early in the book, she sends text to all these people asking for their endorsement, and she posts supposedly what their texts were back. And on that list are the Clintons, the Obamas, all these people she's got the personal cell number of. And, she writes Hillary wrote us back this nice, warm, whatever. And I'm like, well, okay. That doesn't make you look particularly good, right? It doesn't make you look particularly good that Bill Clinton is I want to speak at that convention. You know what I mean? I will say there's two that I found very notable in those exchanges. The first is Bernie Sanders, who just said, talk about the working class. And I find that funny to get that text back. And the second one, which was even more amusing to me, was Gavin Newsom hiking. We'll call back later. He never did. And I will say if there's anything that makes me think Gavin Newsom might be the next president, it is that. It's maybe he does have some sauce. No, not supporting him politically in any way. But that is the first indication. I was okay, it makes me think that might be a Democrat who doesn't have this loser mentality. That's all I'm saying. Not as supporting it whatsoever. He reminds me of Patrick Bateman. Anyway, that was one of the funniest. There's very few laugh lines in this book, and that I was in a coffee shop and I laughed out loud in Waller's coffee shop. Shout out to Waller's, Decatur, Georgia.
Yeah, I will never
forgive
forgive Kamala Harris for exposing me to the one funny thing that Gavin Newsom ever fucking did.
Yes. That is we hate to hand it to gruesome Gavin for once, but every now and then you got to. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden does come off as Joe Biden's the comic relief in this book. I appreciate that. Every time he shows up, it is the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. She's talking about the debate prep, and she says, you got to punch back. And he replies, and then it says, his voice lightened. He recalled how his mother had once promised him a quarter if he went back and punched a bully who'd been picking on him. He did, and she gave him 50 cents. It's oh my God.
It's
just like I thought.
It's one of those things that, obviously he is a genocidal war criminal.
One of the worst.
But much like Trump, I kind of almost miss, I should say, much like when Trump was away, I kind of was like, like he's an awful human being, but I kind of miss having that humor around. Joe Biden had this particular kind of like, with the corn pop story, and with
Right.
like he had that kind of like he had that vibe that like your racist, pop had, that is just like, well, and then I told old whatever old corn pop that he can shut his cornhole, and then I punched
Yeah.
him, and then everybody cheered, and he has this like real sensibility to him that's like it feels of its time. Like you forget that this man like is that old until he starts talking like like his childhood was in fucking black and white or something.
I was down drinking sarsaparillas with Catfish Mortimer, and a couple Irishmen walked down the road.
Yeah. Well, it was, y'all remember him telling the story of why he's accepting of gay people? Do y'all remember that?
No.
I'm curious what your evolution was like on marriage equality and what the federal government might be able to do to protect LGBTQ Americans, especially trans kids who are dealing with all these regressive state laws that are popping up right now.
I can remember exactly where my epiphany was.
Okay.
I hadn't thought much about it, to tell you the truth. And I was a senior in high school, and my dad was dropping me off. And I remember about to get out of the car, and I looked to my right, and two well-dressed men in suits kissed each other. I mean, they gave each other a kiss. And then one looked like he was heading to the DuPont building, and one looked like he headed to the Hercules Corporation building. And I'll never forget, I turned and looked at my dad. He said, "Joey, it's simple. They love each other. It's simple." No, I'm not joking. It's simple. They love each other. And it's never been, it's never been, it's just that simple. It doesn't matter whether it's same sex or a heterosexual couple. They should be able to be married. What is the problem? So listen to your auntie and your uncle. Get married. Do it now. Don't wait. Transgender kids is a really harder thing.
I'm like, bullshit, come on. And SNL did a good parody of it where he goes, "Let me tell you how I became to know about gay people. Anybody nervous? Raise your hand if you're nervous." the whole crowd raises their hand. Yeah, it was very much like that. But recentering on this here, in the follow-up to the debate, Kamala has to go on TV and defend Joe Biden's record. The debate where Joe Biden, did horribly, in Atlanta, Georgia, by the way. And she writes this on Cooper's follow-up panel, because she had just spoken. CNN's national correspondent John King kicked off his remarks. "I just want to make an observation about your interview with the vice president. I think one of the greatest acts of political malpractice I've seen in my lifetime doing this is that they kept her under wraps for 3 years. Now she's on the road. She has great appeals. She also has potential for star power. And on issues like reproductive rights in the black community, she is a great asset to the team. They have kept her under wraps." And that will be kind of a theme going forward, that she felt like during the Biden administration, she was kept under wraps or kind of kept in a backseat position. I will say, how will we feel about this? Because it came to mind that she was pretty invisible during that period. In my, what do y'all think?
Yeah, I will say that, like, it is notable that she feels like she was kept under wraps, like she was a secret weapon. And I recall every single time that she would make, like, an appearance, whether it be candid, like paparazzi caught up to her, or, like, she would, give a comments to the press or something like that. I don't know, she was always, like, doing some, like, goofy shit, like, zooted out of her fucking mind, just, like, like, it didn't strike me as, like, oh, like, this powerful weapon, like, that's, just ready to be, like, unleashed. It seemed like she was about as there as Joe was most of the time, for different reasons, but...
The wheels
Yes.
on the bus go round and round.
Wheels on the bus go round and round.
Yeah, like the time that they catch her like walking out of like the restaurant, and I can't remember what they were asking. They were asking her, I think maybe about like Gaza or something like that, and she responds, she's like shrimp and grits, like she or something like that. She holds up her like her lunch order and everything, and then gets into the limo and drives off. And
Madam Vice President, Hamas says it accepted a ceasefire
You wanted
deal.
to know? Shrimp and
Hamas
grits.
says it accepted a ceasefire deal. Your reaction?
That's her equivalent of when Biden was eating chocolate ice cream. They asked, "What are you eating?" He said, "Double chocolate ice cream." They said, "What do you have to say to Republicans in Congress holding up your legislation?" And he goes, "Get some double chocolate ice cream." Like it's the same shit. It's just she's kind of got a wine mom vibe about it. Worst woman at your job vibe. But like, yeah, I tend to agree. I remember the standout moments from the administration. I remember her big speech in Guatemala where she said, "Don't come to this country. We don't want you here," basically like that. I remember they were calling her border czar for a while. And Republicans were using that as a line of attack to say she was soft on the border. If we look at her actual record, which she touts proudly in this book, I might add, she was pushing in Congress for the most draconian border bill, I think, in U.S. history, at least as far back as I can look. She was proposing the type of stuff that Donald Trump is doing right now. It was like a tripling of ICE. It was building all this infrastructure on the wall. It was for the wall, all of this different stuff. Even in this book, she's like, when Trump did a video at the wall, it was something Obama built. Like, that's a flex, right? Like, that's a flex that they were actually harder on immigration. And she makes the point, it's a correct point, that Donald Trump killed that bill so it would not pass under Joe Biden. It's true. He wanted to run on the issue because, again, he wants it more. But, like, at the end of the day, the actual material of that, what they're saying is not Donald Trump's issue on the border is wrong. His stance is wrong because he is, he's a racist, because we want more people to come into this country and work, because there's plenty of space here, because, I don't know, she tries to talk about root causes of immigration without once mentioning imperialism. Kind of interesting. Not that, but rather, we wanted to be more vicious and they would not let us. And like, the idea that that's going to sell anyone, who are you bringing into your tent with that except for Liz Cheney? Like, genuinely. Like, that, like, literally except for her, except for that one person, based on the vote turnout records.
Well, and it's so mealy-mouthed, right? She can't even have the courage of her conviction that, like, yeah, I campaigned with this horrible person, and I defend it for this reason, and this reason, and this reason. First of all, it reads almost exactly like the bit in President is Missing, where the president is talking about the Israeli prime minister. Like, yeah, like, this person and I have had disagreements, but at the end of the day, we come together on this specific thing, right? It's shocking, uncanny, how similar those things are, A. But also, but B, as well, like, she falls back on, but I only campaigned for a day and a half with Liz Cheney. Yeah, and you campaigned for 0 days. You didn't allow a speaking slot to any number of Palestinian activists, right, at the DNC. That was a calculated decision, and, I understand it wasn't yours at the end of the day, but you defended this particular thing that went on. By the way, Ruha Rahman's running for governor in this state. She was one of those uncommitted activists that was denied a speaking slot. Again, like, not an endorsement here. I don't know a whole hell of a lot about her politics, but like, what you do to the people in your party who purportedly are polling for the same thing that you are, however differently, like, that resonates throughout the the future. And it's remarkable to me that she would kneecap this very real sense of she would avoid tapping into this very real frustration among her base. Like, the majority of Democrats want us to stop arming Israel, for example. Like, it speaks to, again, we'll keep coming back to this but such an out-of-touchness, right? There is a bit in this book where one of her staffers suggests that they make her campaign logo a coconut tree, and she flatly rejects that. And it's like, no, that's the one funny thing people remember about you. Lean into it.
I think that this is as good a time as any to just note this, because it really is heavy over the whole thing, but it's got to be talked about. Gaza hangs over this entire thing, like to say, I don't even know what metaphor, like a fucking hurricane forming, right? Like, there is, because despite her in this book and in her record trying to run away from it, the policy under the Biden administration was materially the same as the policy has been under the Trump administration towards Gaza, which was giving Israel a blank check. And I will note, she said herself, I've got the quote next to me, that that there is no conditions under which Israel would stop receiving military aid from the United States. In this book, she says, I was, what's the term she uses? Let me make sure I get this right. She says, I was ambivalent about Netanyahu, but I was ironclad for my support for Israeli defense. So one, Kamala Harris, call in this book, you say Israel is committing war crimes. You admit that. You are blaming it on Netanyahu as an individual. So first of all, by your own metrics, you're ambivalent about a guy you just said committed war crimes personally. Interesting. So either it was this guy who you seem to like well enough, or it was this state, which you said that there is no conditions under which you will not support. Now, she makes the point that her difference with Joe on Gaza, this is her words in the book, is that he wasn't showing enough public empathy. Like, it wasn't not a material difference, but a display. To read this, Netanyahu was bent on undermining Joe Biden, one of Israel's staunchest allies. I had pleaded with Joe when he spoke publicly on this issue to extend the same empathy he showed to the sufferings of Ukrainians to the suffering of innocent Gazan civilians. But he couldn't do it. While he could passionately state, I am a Zionist, his remarks about innocent Palestinians came off as inadequate and forced. And yes, off the bat, that's her admitting that anyone who wants to defend Joe Biden's Gaza record, shut the fuck up. But also, her criticism of him is sound nicer in the speeches. Say like, I hear you. I'm holding space for you about this. Mm-hmm. Not stopping the shipment of bombs. I mean, goddamn.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's funny that you say like I hear you, because she literally does the I see you, I hear you later whenever talking about like ceasefire protesters. Like, and I was like, I couldn't believe that actually made it into the edit, like, because of how much of a meme that's become. And that kind of goes again to like how out of touch she is.
Yeah, literally, it's blue thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, but it's incredible because I mean, she's literally just doing no, trust me, bro, he's really like a nice guy when you get to know him. When we can look at first of all, I don't give a fuck. He could be, once again, going back to Hitler loved dogs, you
can find a positive trait about any individual in all of human history.
He could be the nicest guy on a person-to-person basis, but it doesn't change what his actual material policies were towards Gaza, which was unconditional aid, as babies were getting blown up by bunker busters, and that's just I don't care if he even did come out and say, have a little bit more empathy in his speeches, if he was still dropping bombs. But it's really telling that he couldn't even do that bare minimum, and that she can't bring herself to actually meaningfully condemn or even differentiate herself from his absolutely disastrous policy, which at this point, the vast majority of the Democratic Party voter base opposes.
On that very same tack, too, about foreign policy, it's interesting because one would not know that the vice president has a job based on this book, aside from 2 passages. Presumably you can just run for president and not do anything else with the fucking job.
Well, it dovetails into what you're saying. She does deflect any liberal ideas that she wasn't involved in, the genocide, decision making. I am inclined to believe her when she says she was on almost every phone call with Netanyahu, because why would you admit to that with the polling that you have access to? But go on.
Yes. Well, I wanted to say she's doing some stuff, but what I was going to say is the only time she talks about doing VP work in this whole book is always foreign policy shit, and it is the meetings with Netanyahu, it is the first Iran, to call it the Iran attack. She frames it like Iran just decided to shoot missiles one day, but yes, where I will say the Iran attack that happened in summer of 2024 was a very clearly sort of show attack that was meant to be shot down. I would not be surprised if Iran like sent an email ahead of time. They were like, guys, we got to do this. Like, it was a very clear, like, tit for tat. Like, this is one of these things you do. It happens. She mentions doing that. And she mentions meeting with Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the president of the United Arab Emirates. Right? Like, she's
she glazes him so hard. Like,
yeah, she's like, I had time to meet with one guy, so I decided to meet with this guy who runs the fucking slave state in the UAE. She says, now, to be sure, I had issues with some of his policies. For example, he'd gotten into some scuffles in Sudan and Yemen, and we had to tell him to stop. And it's like, first of all, he did that with your full consent and backing. UAE planes in Yemen were being gassed by American planes in the air. So let's be very clear about that. Where the hardware came from, the intelligence, all of that shit, right? But also the human rights of their own country. Like, it's just fascinating. And I also take this to make the point that I find to be relevant, especially right now, because we live in a very conspiratorial and tough time, that and this is not to downplay anything that Israel has done. It is to say that this shit goes even beyond Israel, right? Israel is one spoke in this imperial wheel, and these people are doing this shit everywhere. I mean, obviously, Gaza is currently the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world we see, but UAE, throwing that out, what they've done to Sudan is also a humanitarian crisis on a level of a similar scale. And so I find that to also be incredibly relevant, that they are doing this at all points. And so, we live in like a conspiratorial time trying to figure out, why do they do this in Israel, or why do they do this in Russia? It's like, actually, when you look at the American empire, they do this everywhere. And she's so part of the system that even thinking of herself as a progressive, she's able to be like, that's a normal thing to do, is to meet with this guy.
Well, and it makes it all the more astonishing that she takes Donald Trump to task for meeting with diplomats from the Taliban. Like, she says, oh, yeah, they brought these heinous oppressors of women into the White House. And it's like, you met with the head of the UAE, you met with Netanyahu, however odious you claim to have found him, not that that matters. What is your ideological opposition exactly to meeting with heinous oppressors?
That's also interesting. Like, she talks at length about meeting with like the heads of like Germany and France, and it's like, oh, because those are good countries, right? Like, let's look at the kill count of the Taliban versus fucking Germany and France. Like, we're I'll get too mad here.
Germany, by the way, one of the major suppliers of arms to Israel.
Yes, of course. France, yeah. Like, she even mentions, I met with Macron to talk about our joint operations in the Sahel. Say more?
Yeah. Just some of the casual things that she drops in here that, like you said, you can tell that, like, she just views this as like the normal operation. Like, this is just what you do. Like, this is what you do in maintenance of empire, and she fundamentally does not have a problem with the maintenance of empire, and like the ideal Democrat is one that even whenever they have differences with these leaders, they can kind of hold their nose and and do their job with some degree of decorum.
He was a great statesman, or she was a great negotiator. Yeah,
they fucking love decorum and rules. Like you said earlier that, like, she doesn't, spoiler alert for the end of the book, but Donald Trump wins, and you said, like, the only times you see her doing her job are these like meetings with foreign leaders. I will say one other notable exception is when she goes in depth about how, as much as it tore her up inside, the day she had to certify the election as the president of the Senate, in her role as vice president, and just, I mean, once again, like, that was just kind of like the cherry on top of a book filled with so many so much just blatant like over the top praising of decorum. Like, she talks about so many different staffers, like, oh, hey, we wore a dress suit every day, like, as is fitting with the office, because he respected the office so much.
unbelievable.
Well, and on
She
the
does
subject
do
of
that, yeah.
like of things that Democrats claim to value and oppose, like she rails on and on and on about misinformation and how that's like taken over our mediascape. I'm not going to get into the of course Bill Clinton's responsible for the deregulation that led to the consolidation of a media empire like Sinclair, for example. Don't have to get into that, but like for all that she rails about misinformation, she contributes remarkably, particularly in the Gaza segments, to a critical misunderstanding of key points, specifically regarding the U.S. role in the genocide. I'm thinking of the bit where she's like, "Yeah, Israel had just pulled off an audacious operation, killing Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh. She doesn't name him, but killing him while he's in Tehran." What's left out of that is that he was in Tehran for ceasefire negotiations at the time. He was on a diplomatic mission, and Israel blew him up. Doesn't merit any comment other than that. It just sounds like he was meeting with the Legion of Doom in the quote-unquote bad country, right? This also, like...
Yeah, no, it sounds like Robin talking to Batman. Audacious move, Batman! Like, come on!
Yeah.
What the fuck are we talking about?
And like this, she brings up like, like it was so scary, like 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitic harassment, according to whom? The Anti-Defamation League, who considers From the River to the Sea at protests like anti-Semitic harassment. Like, but the thing...
The
like,
ADL, who, by the way, tried to ruin the lives of Jewish activists who were up against apartheid South Africa in the 90s. Like, come on.
Yes,
Fuck
and
outta
who
here.
is now like targeted by the FBI.
Who defended Elon Musk for throwing up the Sig Heil? Yeah.
But like, and this is as somebody who has done some, I'm not a historian, but as somebody who's done like some significant reading into World War II, worked on worked in that field. I worked on a fucking World War II video game. But like, as somebody who's read a lot about this stuff, like. The bit where she describes October 7th, 2023 as a pogrom broke my fucking brain. Because you cannot have a pogrom perpetuated by people breaking out of the reservation you've corralled them into. That is not what a pogrom is. A pogrom is Jewish settlers chanting death to Arabs, rampaging through the streets of the West Bank, burning down Arab properties, beating them in the streets. And if you have a problem with that language applied to that situation, take it up with Ehud Olmert, who was PM of Israel at the time of one such situation. It is the favored population wreaking violence on an unfavored population with the assent or participation of the state. And by using the word pogrom, she has taken that wildly out of context and applying it to a moment of resistance. She is equating, demonizing, in fact, a people who are under genocide and sanction and who have been for decades.
And when she's going and she directly compares the shooting of 3 Palestinian teenagers in the United States to like people putting up posters that she considers to be offensive in New York and calls them equal acts. One of them is an anti-Semitic act of terror. One of them is an anti-Arab act of terror. When she equates that, I don't know who's on those posters. Let's even give her the benefit of the doubt and say they were offensive and anti-Semitic. I doubt it, but let's say they, because I know what she thinks those are, but let's say they did. When you equate that, in a country where Jews do actually get attacked, where you have things like the Tree of Life shooting, where you have, fucking Elon Musk, I want to say again, talking about great replacement theory, talking about cabals, when you have fucking Marjorie Taylor Greene, representative from our state, accusing Jewish people of starting forest fires, when you have that going on, what does that cause? It causes it to become an impossible conversation to even have, where you are someone who is outside of that community trying to, oh my God, it drives me crazy. I feel insane saying this right now because of who this person is, but I would recommend people watch the Adam Friedland interview with Hakeem Jeffries, with Richie Torres. And I feel crazy citing Adam Friedland as an expert on this, but he is an expert on being a Jew in the United States. You know what I mean? And if you read his replies, he does have some serious anti-Semitism against him. So he does have experience with that. And him talking about how hard it is for him to exist as a Jewish person right now with the worst people in the world speaking for him at every moment. And none of us on this podcast, I believe, are Jewish. I can't speak. We have had Jewish guests, but we are not right now. So I can't speak to that experience. So I would like to refer people over to that, as silly as Adam Friedland's content usually is, because that really I don't know, it hit me in the gut. But,
and it exposes just how completely soulless. I know Richie Torres is an individual. He's not necessarily the entire Democratic Party, but I think he is representative of that absolute soulless nature of the contemporary Democratic Party. Because he comes off as an absolute ghoul in that.
Like, he's telling a Jewish man that he doesn't know what anti-Semitism is, right?
Yeah. Who is that is the only time I've ever seen in my life Adam Friedland actually display sincere emotion.
Yes.
Or
that's
he's
why
not
it's
being
so effective.
ironic. And it's and Torres is just completely unmoved by it. And has this you want to talk about fucking Patrick Bateman, just absolute just a husk of a human being, And
it's just so hard to read this entire book because you could write in 107 days on the ground in Gaza or, a number of places attacked by the American Empire. You could do in 107 days in so many locations that would be that across this exact same period of what people were going through, inflicted by directly or indirectly U.S. imperialism. And Kamala Harris at the top of the list, she briefly shouts out what's going on in Guatemala and Honduras and tough conditions in Venezuela, tough conditions sending people north. And it's what is the 107 days of someone in Venezuela who because you didn't approve of how they voted for fucking president, you decide to strangle their economy? What's the 107 days like for that person? What's the 107 days for the Guatemalan migrant who, because their country does not have control over their natural resources because of a U.S. coup in the 50s, has to fucking hike north for 107 days to get to your fucking border and deal with the worst guys imaginable because they got a $50,000 ICE bonus? That I want to hear their 107 days, not this bullshit.
I do love on that subject. I do love the bit where she says, most people don't want to move unless they lost their job, can't find a livelihood. And in the very next paragraph, she talks about playing a role in securing investment in the global South. I'm sure there's no connection there. Surely, again, Bill Clinton, fucking NAFTA.
She declines to talk about her helping Nestle invest in those same countries, probably because she knew the optics of that. But Nestle, one of the countries she helped invest there. I have to note, too, while I'm thinking about that, she does this same thing on every single issue. It is not just Gaza. It's not just imperialism. It's not just immigration. Hear this. Talking about climate change, which she says keeps her up at night. I mean, you could tell it really galls her. Everyone who said we can't afford to make the necessary changes to achieve net zero carbon emissions didn't seem to grasp that we couldn't afford not to. What sort of American economy will we have in a future where even Wall Street itself could be drowned by rising water? Okay, good paragraph. I'm sure it'll be followed up by, I have been the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the most consequential climate bill ever enacted into law. And yeah, she immediately talks about the Inflation Reduction Act and how she signed it into law. And yes, there were some green energy investments there. But then she'll go on to say shortly afterwards, and I determined fracking was important to keep the U.S. economy afloat. Right? You just wrote this paragraph written let's be honest, it's written by a college student who just learned what climate change was, but written mostly true. And then you're just yeah, but we got to have fracking. And she also goes on to say these green energy investments we made, I didn't want to talk about them on the campaign trail because the average voter can't understand them. The average voter can't comprehend them. And I'll say this. The IRA actually did have some pretty good investments in it. It was also designed very much to be a very easy to kill investment because it was over 10 years. What are the chances of Republicans not having control sometime in 10 years? They're all fucking dead. All of that bill's dead now. But in the best possible world of this, you think voters are dumb if you think they can't understand, hey, we just spent money on this and over the next few years it's going to build this. People save money. People plan the future. We do that. Everyone who's alive in this country does that. So even things like that is very frustrating that she does not think voters have brains. And she talked to them like it on the campaign trail.
Yeah. The utter contempt that she shows for the average voter is absolutely bewildering. And then then when she loses, she turns around and once again blames the voter or the people who didn't vote while she was talking to them and about them like this for the entire campaign.
Yeah, it comes across as very, as a woman, if you will permit me some internalized misogyny, she comes across as very arrogant, not just toward the voters, but also toward her colleagues. Like,
Well, we made it 3 years. We're canceled now. Sorry, no, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yes. My
Hot take: presidential candidate is arrogant. No, go ahead, Lenore. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Excuse me for calling another woman arrogant. There's a bit during when she's talking about vetting her potential VP, right? And she's speaking to Josh Shapiro. Who is it? It's
And
Josh
Mark
Shapiro.
Kelly. Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly.
Yeah,
and Tim
Josh
Walz.
Shapiro, Mark Kelly. 39 combat missions in Desert Storm. Anti-immigrant. Not a great guy.
Anti-union.
But yeah, anti-union too. She's talking to Josh Shapiro though, and she has this. He peppered me with questions, trying to nail down in detail what role I saw for my vice president. At one point, he mused that he would want to be in the room for every decision. I told him bluntly that was an unrealistic expectation. A vice president is not a co-president. I had a nagging concern that he would be unable to settle for a role as number 2, and that it would wear on a partnership. I had to be able to completely trust the person in that role. Every day as president, I said, I'll have 99 problems, and my VP can't be one. First of all, like, I can't decide whether it's cringe or not that she surreptitiously calls him a bitch. But on the other hand here, like, I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, 20 pages ago you just said you've just taken pride in being in the room for Biden's important telephone calls. Why do you then turn around and tell Shapiro to stay in his lane? Like, is Biden capable or not?
She was needed in the room to remind Biden he wasn't on the phone with his, like, dead granddaughter or something.
Yeah.
But, like, fucking... that whole VP selection process is interesting to me because, one, like, first of all, just, like, the game of it all is so fascinating, right? 2, they're, like, so worried about the press that they're, like, ducking and hiding, picking people up at, like, playgrounds. And it's like, is this really what our, like, even with the best of candidates, imagining these people were, is this really what our system is? Like, are we really, like, what a charade that this is the game we play, that people are coming to, like, try out for this woman that was elected by nobody, and they're having to hide from press, and it's like being tweeted, and they're being like, it's so sickening that this is the way we run things, even if these were good candidates. But yeah, that whole bit is interesting too. I also just have to say, I you know, far from the biggest issue in this book, but I have to note it for the gays. She says Pete Buttigieg, she would have wanted to pick him, but she couldn't because he was gay. Okay. Famously, I am famously one of those. Just on the level of, like, that she just throws this out. You know what I mean? Like, she puts that there. And I, on one level, can think cynically, like, okay, yeah, you know, you're doing, like, demographic counts, whatever. On the other hand, you're saying this was the best guy and I chose him because he was not gay. And you are mad when the LGBT community ever has, like, a bit of skepticism about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you very specifically said you did not want this man for that reason. And what's hilarious is it reflects more on your character. It reflects a lot on your character. You don't want him for being gay, but it reflects more on his character that you did want him for the other stuff. Because holy shit, Mayor Pete is not a good guy. But, like, it's just fascinating. It's like, who are you losing in this election? Who did you think you were going to win over? What right-winger is going to want right-winger light out of you? It just shows this, like, it's this flaw at the heart of the Democratic Party where they're playing this, like, demographics game, but they fundamentally don't understand the game they're playing, which is how you land with, like, Tim Walz.
Yeah, it's so funny with the whole Pete Buttigieg thing. Because she gets pressed on this later. I can't remember on which show in the media run for the book. She gets pressed on this, and she has genuinely some of the worst media training and some of the worst, like, political instincts I've seen from someone on her level. Because
in her book,
I mean,
she seems to say she's great, but I'll take
yeah. or she, like, quotes someone else who says, "Oh yeah, no, she's doing a great job." That's my favorite trick she pulls throughout this whole thing. Is like, people said I was doing a bad job, but here's someone that I know who said I was actually doing a great job. So, yeah, but she gets pressed on this, and she basically says, "No, it's not because he was gay." and then like comes back around and then says, it's just, yeah, I didn't think we were ready for a gay vice president and a black woman. So it's like, it's not because he's gay. It's just because he's gay, and I was kind of just astonished by, because like everyone knows the standard Democratic nomination, like mathematics, like they know the calculations that are made. Like Joe Biden was selected to be Obama's vice president because if we're gonna put a black guy up, we gotta like balance it out with an old white guy. Like everyone knows how that game is played. Like people are not stupid in that way. So for her to like just bungle so horribly, like trying to explain this process so that people still end up really pissed at her, is kind of incredible. Like, and that comes through in the book too. And she had like presumably people editing this book and someone like helping ghostwrite it.
Well, and again, like it comes back to, y'all are absolutely right. It comes back to the Democrats playing this demographic game with not any of the tens of millions of people who don't vote because they feel disconnected from the process, and who are we to disagree with them? But, it's very revealing in the people that they are trying to court. She has a bit here where she says, immigration had surged, and to some it felt like an invasion. We couldn't gaslight the people who felt that way by denying the problem. Fucking yes, you can! You're making a conscious choice to court people who believe in white replacement. Like, what do you mean when you say statistics that prove immigrants commit less crime don't register with people? When was the last time any Democrat ran on immigrants committing less crime and providing a net economic benefit, and most pertinently, deserving to have homes and health care?
When a politician stands up and makes a case for things, that pushes the public in that direction, right? If you stand up and say the country is not ready for someone who's gay on this stage, then the country is more likely to not be ready, versus if you push them and force them in that direction, right? That so many effective people's movements in this country which have not waited for the politicians to allow, that they have taken it and made it happen themselves, have said, let's take the civil rights movement, for example. All right, we are pushing this issue. We are making this part of your lives. You're saying that like black people can't sit at the counter. You are now going to deal with that, and you are going to have to fight us to keep that from happening. You're going to say that women don't have the right to be in this room. We're going to get as many women in the room as possible. We're going to push it. We are going to talk about it. We are going to confront you with the facts. We're going to confront you with pathos, ethos, logos, all of it on every single level, from the level of direct action to propaganda. And then that wins people over. Things are not majority. Things don't just magically become majority positions, right? The Republicans manage to win on minority positions all the time. Republicans have never been popular on abortion, and it has not stopped them from winning elections, right? Because they forge their electorate. There are parts of their electorate that are not as radical as them, and they work to radicalize those elements of their electorate. Could we not do this for something that's like actually a more wholesome, like good project? Like, she's admitting the statistics there. This is not us being fucking lefties coming up with our own like whatever left spin on this. This is her words. She's saying immigrants are good for this country. Unfortunately, just wasn't a thing that I could say. Well, your parents are, motherfucker. Like, what is wrong with you? Where is your heart and soul?
Well, and the bit that really crystallizes for me is that she understands what it means to fight for something and to stick with principles and to take your lumps along the way. There is a bit in day 21 days to the election, toward the end. Character matters and voters respect it. When I was DA, I did not seek the death penalty in a case I successfully prosecuted for the murder of a police officer. There were demonstrations, death threats. The Attorney General, a Democrat, and the U.S. Attorney tried to take the case away from me. I thought my career was over. Years later, an elderly man from a conservative part of town approached me. You know, I didn't agree with your decision, but I respect the fact that you said who you were and what you were going to do, and you stuck with it. And it's striking to me that this comes after she defends her position on trans rights. She says that she didn't fight back as forcefully as she could have because, she didn't want to alienate too many people. She adopts the right-wing framing that, there are concerns about trans athletes, of course, that we have to address. Very, very, nonsense things. These things have already been settled. But it's the way that she talks about it that's really revealing about how liberals really think of trans rights and of, like, human rights in general when they're under attack. She says here, let's start with people. Transgender people are Americans with the same rights we all have to liberty, equality, the standard boilerplate stuff that means nothing when you look at her record, right? There aren't very many. A tiny minority of less than 1% of the population. Of these, in 2024, less than 10 played on women's college sports teams. Less than 10. The law says incarcerated people must be provided with medical care. Under that law, 2 federal prisoners have received court-ordered gender affirmation surgery. 2. And then she goes on to say very small numbers, but here are some bigger ones, and she gives some suicide statistics, statistics about trans people being more likely to be victims of a violent crime. And it's like, look, always when somebody says, well, there's not many, well, it's like these like small sports that don't have any like difference, like muscle wise, like whenever people are saying this stuff, what you should be hearing is, but if there were a bunch of them in sports, then it would be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
They're downplaying it instead of rebutting the fact that Republicans are trying to demonize us the same way they demonized gay people, the same way they demonize black people, any minority group that they want to restrict from society in a certain way. Trans people face genocide in this country and an everyday epistemicide as part and parcel of interacting with the medical complex that doesn't listen to us, that is intent on treating us as insane freaks, right? I don't even want to say laboratory curiosities because they don't even study us to begin with. Unless you are willing to specifically call out and combat the oppression we face, instead of just rattling off statistics and handing out the number to a suicide hotline when a transgender child being beaten to death makes the news, all while gradually adopting increasingly reactionary framing justifying our exclusion from society, we don't need you claiming to be on our side. What she ends with here is the pronoun that matters is we. Like, this is just all lives matter.
The pronoun that matters is we. She really thought she was spitting with that. Lenora, one thing that came to mind too is it's like, if she is worried about these deaths, if she is worried about these suicides, if she's worried about all of this, you just said you're horrified by Trump running these ads, Kamala's for they, them, Trump is for you. You said you're horrified by these ads. She says it. Let's say she is. I doubt it, but let's say she is. Her campaign had a bigger budget than Donald Trump's campaign. Donald Trump had more money than God, and she had more money than that. She could have, if she had chosen to, run ads with the families of murdered trans people, talking about these stories, citing these statistics, saying when Donald Trump says this about trans people, immigrants, etc., people get hurt. They die, right? That this is that we are playing with real stakes. This isn't a words game. There are a lot of people in this country who probably snicker at the they, them, you, whatever line. It's like it feels fake, right? But it has those real consequences. And there's a lot of people who aren't thinking about it like that a politician of this stature has the capacity to make them think about it that way. And it has the capacity to push them in that way. And choosing not to is intentional. You have so much money. You have so much capacity. You have such a huge media team. You're able to get out ads about 1,000,001 things, the most specific shit imaginable. Why can you not talk about this stuff? Why can you not show basic human empathy to these people? These stats you cite about immigrants, about trans people, why can't you throw those up on the screen and trust voters for 5 seconds? And if you don't trust voters, then why do you want there to be elections at all? Why do you care about the sanctity of elections in the first place? It's got to be one. And what it comes down to is she's just like, it's what's so crazy is, and it's why we say this is a systemic problem, it's not an individual problem, is that the system creates people like this to carry out the system's, the way it works. Because she is just a creature of it. She's like, what you do is you run the numbers, you look at what's popular, you hit the campaign trail, you go to the swing states. The decorum of it is she is just part of it. It's fucking crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's why the system has to change.
Yeah, there's a complete abdication of any sort of moral imperative or responsibility, as someone who is ostensibly running as a progressive who cares about these issues. That like you say, it's like they completely overlook or forget or conveniently just never think about the fact that they have the ability to shape the narrative in a positive way about this. That on these defining issues, their posture is just entirely reactive, and it's just trying to like downplay it as an issue, almost like you said, Lenore, like just like, oh, it's you know, it's not actually something that affects you because it's like not that many of them, so like, you know, just don't worry about it. Like, not that like you as a voter and you as just a person should care about this, because there's likely people that you know that are affected, and even if not, it should just be something that you care about as a matter of basic decency. But instead of shaping that like that kind of moral narrative, they just completely surrender the narrative to the right, because that's what they're also doing whenever they're doing this, like, oh yeah, but there's not that many of them, is like you said, it's like if there were more, then it might be an issue. So they're letting the right completely frame that matter, and then just like trying to, you know, like trim away at the edges so that it's a little bit more palatable for what they think like the middle of the road voter is.
We had a Democratic politician here in Georgia's Congress. I've the name slips me, but said when they, what did you say?
Elena Parent?
No, I don't think so. This is just a statement that was made. It might have been, but I'm not sure. Where she said people were talking about trans people in sports, right? And they were talking about that. And she was like, oh, who cares about women's sports anyway, is the defense. And it's like, come on. That's the best you can do.
That's the best you got. Nobody watches the WNBA.
Like,
yeah, that's really fucking funny. Like, as like the WNBA is kind of having a moment over the last several years,
yes.
like to just be like, yeah, no one cares about women's sports anyways. You know, it reads as like that's like hacky 90s stand-up comedy material, just like, oh, women in sports, am I right? You know,
that's a Twitter bit about being a trans inclusive misogynist, you know what I mean? Like that's not a real thing a sitting politician should say.
Last thing I'll say about like her record on trans people, just look up the case of Norsworthy v. Beard. You know, Michelle Lale Norsworthy, who was denied gender reassignment surgery in prison in 2012, the year after Harris became Attorney General. A federal judge had to order that she be granted her health care in 2015 on the grounds that denying it was cruel and unusual punishment. Of course, Harris said, well, you know, like Harris said later, well, a lot of people write briefs in my office without my consultation. Really, really flimsy excuse. But sorry, you signed your name to it and then you took up an appeal with the Ninth Circuit Court, you know, after you were deemed to be defending a violation of the Eighth Amendment. You also refuse, you know, she says that, well, it was my job to defend the state in this. You refuse to defend Proposition in court. Clearly you have the power to oppose Proposition 8 in court. You clearly have the power to oppose an injustice when you're so inclined.
She was just following orders, Lenore.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that's the best defense ever. She also backed Fosta Sesta, by the way, in 2018, which shut down a bunch of sites used by sex workers and locked them out of their livelihoods and denied them screening tools they used to keep themselves safer. Like, lots of trans people are forced into underground economies such as sex work, in no small part because we are thrice as likely to be unemployed.
But remember, she calls herself a defender. You know,
that's true.
You know what, Josh? You're absolutely right. Like, she does. On her campaign website, she had a campaign sticker that was her wearing a blue pantsuit, a pink pantsuit, and a white pantsuit, the trans colors. So clearly there must be something there.
It's like
grotesque.
It's like the level of detail you have to go into to draw her as an ally is like the way that like a certain type of Taylor Swift fan are trying to confirm Taylor Swift is a lesbian by pulling individual song lyrics, the Gaylors. You got to do that with Kamala's record for her to be pro-LGBT.
No,
it's like,
Travis Kelce is the ultimate beard.
Yeah, if you look into the individual lines, she says, you know, it was like a moment in time. Was she referring perhaps to lesbian sex? I'm telling you, go on the r/Gaylor if you ever want to have just a great time with like liberal QAnon.
Can I just say real quick, as a complete aside, as a native Kansas Cityan, I fucking hate that our starting tight end's dick is the subject of a Taylor Swift song now, and that I have to hear about it. And like, I never needed to know all of that about Travis Kelce, and
Look.
I never needed. life was so good when no one cared about Kansas City sports outside of Kansas City, and we weren't like the fucking evil empire for the rest of
Josh,
for
think
the
about it
rest
this
of the
way.
country.
Think about it this way. It could have been worse. There could have been a song about how your tight end's dick was bad.
Yeah. Fair
At
enough.
least it was positive. But
Fair
I
enough.
want to say I have a whole genre of note in this book that I just wrote over and over. The Republicans wanted it more. And I want to go over the times where I said that. Let me just do this really quick. First, when Kamala took the podium and everyone was in high spirits, she talked about Trump. A chant started, "Lock him up." And she says, "I dislike that chant when Trump aimed it at Hillary, and I wasn't about to encourage it at my rallies. And the democracy I cherish, we don't lock up people just because they're our political opponents. They're locked up if a jury determines they've committed serious crimes." And she says, "Well, hold on, you know what? The courts are going to handle that part of it. What we're going to do is beat him in November." And it's like, well, he was actually convicted of crimes, and then no one did send him anywhere. So what about then? Maybe the people were just like trying to get justice from the courts that they want to believe are their representatives. Would that be crazy?
The one effect that had is Kash Patel is now selling wine with Trump's mugshot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's another one. In 51 days to the election, I was working on my remarks when staff called with the news that there had been another attempt on Trump's life. My initial reaction, how could this be happening? I was relieved he was okay. That's another one where it's like the GOP would never say that about the other side. And again, and not that like Trump dying would have done anything or anything like that. Once again, it's the system.
It would have been very funny.
Right. But like what we do see here is it's not about that. It's about like they do not have that same like dog in them that the GOP does of like actual hatred for their opponents. They do not take this as fucking seriously. Or another example where she says, "Oh, I was mad at Sean O'Brien because he was potentially not going to endorse me. So I didn't have him speak at our convention." Well, the Republicans, prior to his endorsement, which he never ended up actually officially giving, but it was kind of an implicit Republican endorsement, they had him speak at their convention without any guarantee of an endorsement because they knew that Teamsters would pay attention to the Republican convention for probably the first time in a hot minute.
Which is astonishing to me because earlier in the book, she obliquely blames the rightward turn of Elon Musk, or the public rightward turn anyway, he's always been a fascist. She blames that on Biden not inviting him to the White House in 2021 for an event promoting her electric vehicle policy, right? Like this, after she acknowledges Tesla being sued for labor violations, right? You know, of course, she doesn't even go into like his, sex crimes and what that, but like it is very telling who she believes the Democrats should and should not court.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. You have, and she also says, the Teamsters were mad at me because we broke a railway strike. Can't believe they'd be upset with that. And it's like, I don't know, maybe because they were a union and they support unions. And maybe you should have thought about that when you wanted the union's support. Come on. So there's that. Once again, GOP wants it more. Here's another example. She's at a church, right? At a church full of people who already agree with her. And they're reading words over her saying, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Well, that didn't work out. But then it immediately cuts to the day before, Trump had called me a shit vice president. and then it's like, once again, it's horrible. But Trump is out there like, getting dirty with it. Then just to read this next part because it's hilarious and horrible. It was the same speech as a rally in Pennsylvania in which he lauded the penis size of Arnold Palmer to the distress of the late golfer's daughter, which is crazy. His ravings were becoming increasingly unhinged. I wish he understood that in trying to demean me, he instead demeaned the office he sought to hold. This is
what I mean. Where it's just like it's just about propriety and decorum and it's respecting the office and who cares if you lose if you do so with dignity. Like you're gonna go down with the ship, but you're gonna put on your nicest suit. You're gonna it's like real Titanic shit. It's incredible.
Yeah,
and then even after losing the election, when she's giving her concession speech, she says, "Take out the language criticizing Trump. It feels bitter." There had been a section of the speech about the rollback of our rights and freedoms, but I'd said all that already. I'd prosecuted the case. The election was over. Going after Trump was not the work of this day. This day was about lifting up our supporters. And it's like, even Hillary, when she eventually gave her speech, which it took her some time to give, said, and it's time to fight back against Trump's agenda. Like, even Hillary Clinton did that. But because Kamala is like such a creature of the system, she even was like, we have to do this like properly. We don't want to be, once again, they just want it more. The other side, the right wing right now, just has that vicious drive that the Democrats are not capable of conjuring. And when all things being equal, one side wants it more, these things are going to happen. And there's a reason and there's material reasons for that too. But I'm just saying the way they behave obviously comes out of material reasons. But it's like they're behaving one way, you're not behaving another way because they are taking it seriously in a way you are not. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Trump would never certify Kamala's election. Let me just tell you that.
Yeah,
You'd make someone else do it.
Kamala feels like kind of this, like the final boss of this type of like Democratic politician that really came to the fore with Obama getting elected. That's like, I don't know, the first generation of Democratic politicians to have been able to watch and binge and like really ingest the lessons and the aesthetic of the West Wing.
Yes, which she cites directly.
And she even drops a West Wing reference like really late in the book, and I was beginning to think for a second she wasn't going to cite the West Wing, and then she did, and I was just like, it was a little Easter egg moment where I was just like, oh, there it is. Like,
remarkable. Yeah, I will say, you say she's the final boss, but like many great RPGs, when you kill the final boss, like the God form emerges, and I do think that's Mayor Pete. But
yeah,
we'll see.
I think he's gonna be the one, but yeah.
Did y'all see the video the other day of him
he
talking?
Confirmed as Necron from Final Fantasy IX. Sorry, go ahead.
Did y'all see that video of him talking the other day, and he clearly is doing an Obama impression? Like his voice is different now. It's so fucking funny.
Oh my god! Is he
he
allowed to do that?
He did briefly tap into that. Like I think in the lead up to the like. When he was running initially against Biden,
yeah, the Nevada,
he
Nevada
did kind of have the Obama cadence and everything, and then the video that he did the other day, like on Gaza, I think he was who was he? I think he was
with the Pod Save guys, I think.
Or was it with Andrew Callahan?
Andrew Callahan, Channel 5.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and he does this whole like very obviously rehearsed thing about like how hard it is to talk about Gaza, because like no matter what, like someone will say you didn't say this or say that about from one side or the other, and it's the most like rehearsed attempt at relatability I've seen. And yeah, I think you're right. I think he is the true final boss, the McKinsey soulless ghoul that's gonna.
I'll never forget him in him in Nevada, the third or fourth primary state in 2020, when he did a whole bit with his supporters where the lights went out in the gym. I don't know if y'all remember that, and it was like very clearly not a power outage. And he goes, "But if we can light up one person." He like gave them a candle. He goes, and then we can light up 10 people, and they were passing out games. Clearly, we can light up a gym. He goes, then we can light up a city, we can light up a state, we can light up a nation. And then the results came in, and he got 4th place in Nevada.
Yep.
His ass got lit up, I tell you what. Also, just like Mayor Pete, also an LGBT without the T guy, he's also says, yeah, like trans women in sports are a problem.
No fun. Well, as we kind of get towards the end here, thoughts on the election night stuff?
Largely anodyne. I found it rather boring. It is the most eminently skimmable part of the whole thing. I do find it funny that what the fuck is her like chief of staff or whatever his name, the one with the cool name,
Storm or something like that.
Yeah, Storm Horncastle. Yeah, head of public
Awesome.
affairs for Netflix, by the way. The sort of people she runs with. I do find that one part funny where she's going around peeling all the Madam President stickers off of the muffins.
I like that Doug was stressed out. She really thinks Doug's a buffoon. You can tell she's mad at Doug a lot.
Yeah.
Doug
I
kills
know
me.
way too much about their relationship dynamic, and I don't like it. You know, it's like whenever they have that fight towards the end, and he basically he says like we're too important to let this for us to like split apart now. You know, we have to stay together because like. I don't know. They're a power couple of some sort, you know.
Fuck yeah, everyone loves Doug.
Yeah, no, but I am absolutely with Lenore that this was the part of the book where I went from 1.7 speed to the full like 2, even like 2.5 speed. I got to a point in this book where I said like I need to get the fuck through this.
Yes.
Like this is.
First of all, we
too
had to
much
take off
to
the
go.
Madam President decals off of the muffins because it would seem gauche in terms of the victory that no longer seemed assured.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the one part where she was like, I was taking a bath on my one day off on my birthday, and Doug was in the next room, and I was calling for Doug, and he was watching football, so he couldn't hear me. And I was like, let's go, Doug.
Or like when she's like when she can like tell that he like recycled a gift, or like he had a gift like that was planned for a different thing, and like gives
Sounds
it to
like a
him.
nice gift, you know?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
like-
get too mad at Doug there. I can get mad at Doug because his law firm actually has defended Trump recently, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
The thing with Doug is, you know, I had this whole idea in my head for like a funny like cartoon series, like The Adventures of Doug, like the spouse of the person running for president.
Well, I hate to tell you, there's already a show called Doug.
Yeah.
This is The Adventures of Doug. I don't know what the show Doug is, but this is different. This is
You
The
didn't grow up
Adventures.
with Nickelodeon.
No, I was watching VeggieTales at the time.
Not terrible.
Yeah, Doug. I like the idea of The Adventures of Doug, and he's just kind of like bumbling around the country, being like, "I'm the vice president's husband, and you should vote for her." And they're like, "What are your beliefs?" And he's like, "I'm gonna be honest. I didn't do politics before this. I was recruited to marry. Kamala because she needed a husband to run. Sorry, like I don't know what to tell you. I like that idea, but yeah, this ending part is very like." It's very corny. She has the whole thing where she's like, we were stressed about the election. Trump won the election. We got our ass beat. Then I went to the Senate and I stood up and I certified it, and it said both sides stood up and applauded as one. And I'm like, come on. This is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause, et cetera, et cetera.
I fucking despise where she if I can share this longer excerpt.
Please.
The right wing and religious nationalists have played. I'll start with this. What we the people must understand is that the dismantling of our democracy did not start with the 2024 election. The right wing and religious nationalists have played the long game, working for decades to take over state houses, gerrymander districts, and dominate local government boards. Their think tanks like the Federalist Society created the blueprint for stacking the Supreme Court, while the Heritage Foundation created Project 2025. Their plans have been amplified by the rise of a right-wing media ecosystem. We will recall Bill Clinton's role in that, built to operationalize their agenda through massive propaganda, misinformation, and disinformation. Trump was their vehicle, his road paved for him years earlier by a hot and pungent brew. Ronald Reagan's celebrity, Newt Gingrich's belligerent discourse, and Pat Buchanan's nativism. And it is insane to read this, to see her telling us about a long game the Republicans played when you're from a party that let them play it. Like,
Yep.
And then she's like, when we go to the streets as we will, we must not give them the spectacle they're craving. And it's like, motherfucker, people have been in the streets. You sent in the cops to beat the shit out of them.
I also love that she's like, okay, first thing to tell the people to do. Don't get too rowdy. Like the first thing she says before she can even like talk about what we're going to do, she has to preemptively condemn some idea of what people might do to fight back against what she identifies as fascism. And it's like, holy cow. Like, you know, and that's a conversation about tactics is one thing, but just a conversation about like, she like, before we're even talking about, you know, Trump could do anything, but there's under no circumstances we'll ever resist in any meaningful capacity. Don't worry, guys. It's like, if I'm Trump and I read this, you know, if Trump read books, then like I would be like, oh great, well they're never gonna ever push back on me ever. In fact, if I steal the election, it'll be fine. And I'll tell you this: if Donald Trump had managed to steal the election in 2020, I know for a fact they would have found a way to launder it into history, and I can tell you why. Because in 2000, the Republicans stole an election that the Democrats won, and she doesn't even mention it in her list of things.
Well, you know, it's funny on that note. She actually calls it. Like when she was, I think she was talking to Maddow, and she called it, like, she said it ended up being the closest presidential election in the 21st century, and I was just like, clearly someone, like, how could we forget the hanging chads, like, so easily? Like, she lost in every single swing state and lost the popular election, but she's like, it was the closest presidential election in the 21st century, and like you said, there was literally one that was like so close that it could just be stolen like that, and we've just completely
so close that the Republican Supreme Court just decided.
Yeah, and we've just completely, like, you know, whitewashed that out of history, or like normalized it as, like, you know, just I guess that's just something that can happen now. You know, and a whole election can be stolen, and it's only whenever you actually get your, like, you know, violent thugs to crash the Capitol building that we actually, you know, pay some attention to it. But like you said, I have no doubt that they would try and, like, you know, work that somehow into, you know, like how things operate now. You know, try and normalize it.
And at the very end, we have, you know, at this very conclusion, we have her saying, today, I'm no longer sure about the system, sure about that, talking about changing things, because the system's failing us at every level: executive, judicial, legislative, corporate, institutional, media. Every single guardrail that is supposed to protect democracy is buckling. I thought those guardrails would be stronger. I was wrong. To keep people safe and help them thrive, that's what I've always worked for. And that work has never been more needed. When the government sends armed, masked men into churches and courthouses, when children are washed away in known flood zones, starved of resources for adequate warning systems, when the Department of Education is torn apart and the hungry and sick are denied their basic needs. In this critical moment, working within the system by itself is not proving to be enough. I'll no longer sit in D.C. in the grandeur of the ceremonial office. I'll be with the people in towns and communities where I can listen to their ideas on how we rebuild trust, empathy, and a government worthy of their ideals of this country. And I just, like, wrote down, it was like, that's why I, Kamala Harris, am announcing the beginning of the Maoist People's Uprising. she's like, oh, I'm going to work outside the system. No, you're not. No, you're not.
And she hasn't so far. Like we are now, what, 10 months into a Trump administration, and the only thing she's done so far is written a book and gone on a media tour where she yells at protesters.
Yeah, a media tour exclusively of legacy media.
Yeah.
After she decamps to fucking Hawaii to lick her wounds, you know?
Yes, yeah. A media tour exclusively of gigantic media, the exact same gigantic media she blames for Trump's win. So, you know, miss me with this shit. And then we get just a fuck ton of pictures at the end of this thing that, you know, you're blessedly saved from in the audiobook, and that I was blessedly saved from by turning off my e-reader. And that's like it. I mean, she has a little bit at the end about someone wrote her a letter and they were like inspired, or this like girl was inspired by her campaign as like a black woman. And I suppose that's sweet, but it's like, it would be a lot sweeter if it was, you know, someone worth supporting. You know, it would,
or if she had fucking won.
Right. If she had won, or at least had been like, had tried, had put up a fight, something meaningful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, all I can think is like, you failed that child then? That's what we leave this on? But no, because I think the like message we leave this with is like, we did everything we could. We didn't have enough time. Everyone failed us. The system sucks, but not in the sense that you should fight against it. Please don't fight against it. Violence is bad, and also strikes are bad, and also challenging empire is bad, and also lack of decorum is bad. But also, she literally says, we have to preserve the system. That's why I certified Trump's election. But also, this system has completely failed. It's like, she has nothing. This is the best mind the Democratic Party could put up in that last election. And if you have any questions about like the capacity of the Democratic Party as an engine for change, then like, here's your answer right here. This is the best that they can possibly do. The only, and you can say, well, they've had other candidates. Yeah, like Joe Biden. Let's hear his book. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not going to have fucking, I would love a Joe Biden book, unfiltered, but that's a different conversation. I think if he had Twitter, he'd be as funny as Trump if they let him post. It'd be great. But like, yeah, Ben and Jerry's don't slap like it used to. No, but like, it's at the end of the day, that's why, like, if you have any questions about like what is going to save us, it is true. We do need to organize outside the system. Kamala doesn't mean that, but I do. Those of us on this podcast genuinely mean that. That's going to look different for everyone listening to this. And like, I'm not saying, you know, there's never a time for anyone to run an election or whatever. I'm not being absolutist about this. I'm just saying the system is fundamentally designed to create people like Kamala and Trump. And the parties within the system are certainly not designed to ever change it. They are designed to put people like this at the head. And if there's ever a moment of popular uprising in a party where, say, a sitting president is pushed to not run again, like there was this time, then they just appoint the top crony they can pick without any kind of primary. So, like, that's what you're dealing with when you're talking about the Democratic Party. So at the very least, do not trust these people ever. For any reason, whatever your position is on anything, even if you don't consider yourself a revolutionary, which why don't you at this point? But even if you don't consider yourself a revolutionary, how could you ever trust this rotten institution?
Well, you know who we do trust is our lovely guest Josh, who came on to discuss this with us, to help us through the slog that was this book. Josh, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Really, really enjoyed it. Is there anything as we draw to a close here that you'd like to plug, even if it's just like social media? Like, what do you got going on these days?
Yeah, I mean, life is hectic, but I'm trying to keep cranking out good revolutionary art over at Josh Mayfield Artist on Instagram. I suck at plugging myself, but yeah, you can go over there. You can see the art that I've been making. You know, if you want to help me and my wife as we're trying to relocate to a new city, I do have a Patreon. I don't pretend to be good at keeping things up on there, but you do get access to all the posters that I've made from basically when I started to now. That's not true. You don't get access to like the real early shit that sucks, but you know, yeah. Just go check out the socials. Yeah,
gosh, there's so much cool stuff. I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and I've followed you for years, but my gosh, like I'm moving soon, and I feel like I got to put up this like Asada poster wherever I move. It's so sick. Or like I love the dragon one. When the prison doors are open, the real dragon will fly. There's so much cool stuff you're doing on this page. So many cool posters and just
do we want to use like one of Josh? Do we want to use like one of your pictures for the episode art? Because I feel like 107 the cover just doesn't do it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, do we want to imply that art has any connection to the book? I don't think so. True. Well, I'll figure it out. I'll text you about it, Josh, if I have a thought about that. I'll let you know.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate the work we do, the work you do. Lenore, do you want to tell folks what we're covering next week?
Yeah.
Because we covered something really dire here.
Yes. You know,
so
of course.
We decided to go with the other book that people keep recommending us. And it turns out y'all fucking hate us.
Yes, of course. You know, Jacob very, very aptly and comprehensively answered the question of, well, the Republicans are in power, why talk about this book now, right? First of all, because it just came out, you know, content is content. Second, because Harris and Democrats posture themselves as opposition that they're clearly fucking not. But if that answer doesn't satisfy you, next week, we will get to the other wing of the capitalist eagle tearing at our livers. We are, of course, talking about Ben Shapiro, friend of the pod, once more. He has a book called Lions and Scavengers.
Just came out, dropped, and Ezra Klein just dropped an op-ed in the New York Times saying it's good.
Oh,
no. So it has been Democrat approved that Ben Shapiro is now the smart intellectual of the Republican Party. He's normal and good, and we should normalize him and not Trumpism. And we will be having
good old
third time returning guest. we're bringing AJ Diddy back on the pod for this one, so we're pretty excited about that. AJ is the other person who answered the call, responded, swiped up, and said, "Let me do it." And I'm like, AJ, you covered one really good book with us, or one really good book with us. You covered Harry Potter and the Cursed Child with us, which was pretty bad. But this is something new. This is new territories. So, folks, it is a spooky October, to be sure. We'll say that.
Yeah. Masochists of the world unite.
But it's useful, and it's useful that you can be like, if you have family members who are like, I watch Ben Shapiro Owns People videos, or I watch Kamala Harris clapback videos. You can be like, you know what they said in their book, and talk about it, because people don't read these books except for us.
Yes. If there's one lesson to take away from today's offering, it's that if you must be a hater, you must be an informed hater.
That's true. Well, Lenore, you have a sign off here for us, or are we just gonna sort of like fade into darkness, being upset about what we just talked about?
I mean, don't we always? Not always. We've read some very good books recently. Station 11, for example. That'll be out by the time we do this. Yeah, no, like it's dire out there. It's scary. A lot of damage has already been done. But do keep in mind that these people are not nearly meeting the quotas that they want to meet. These institutions are, groaning under their own weight, stumbling over their own shoelaces. Like, we got fucking Kash Patel in charge of the FBI. Like, there is only so much that they can accomplish.
Yeah, so they already got their best guy on the case.
True. Well, if this is their best, like, we're gonna have our revolution next week.
Well,
right? But the point is, there are acts of organized resistance taking place all over the country, in every city. If you have the time, if you have the inclination, if you have the resources, go look them up. See who's mounting a resistance, and just see what you can do.
And be loud about it.
Yeah, be loud about it. Amplify it. Because what fascism relies on is the sense of inevitability, right? It's the aesthetic of power. It has to look cool. It has to look dangerous. And so many of these people are just the worst, goofiest assholes that you will ever come across. And they have been defeated. They can be defeated. They will be defeated.
Here's to defeating goofy assholes. See ya.
Take care.
Please put this in the middle of the music. You know what would make this book good? If it was called 107 Gays.
Got him.
Put that in there somewhere when you do. I know you put the audio in there somewhere. I forgot to say it during the episode. Cool. Okay, let me hit stop.
Thank you for listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.